Hello friends, this is Growl. A blue post was just released an hour or so ago with some pretty unexpected news. In this video, I'll go over these changes and what they mean for the state of the game right now. I think Blizzard is definitely going in a good direction, however, some more steps need to be taken if they want to completely solve this problem. The blue post reads, in the next update to the Shadowlands beta and PTR, we've taken a number of spells categorized as burst cooldowns off of the global cooldown. If you aren't familiar with what exactly this means, almost all spells in WoW incur what is called a global cooldown, shortened to GCD. During your GCD, you cannot cast any other spells, with a few exceptions. Before the last WoW expansion, Battle for Azeroth, a significant number of these exceptions were added to the GCD. Things like Warrior Ignore Pain were added, but then subsequently removed as they hurt the core rotation of the class too badly. Many of these abilities, however, stayed on the GCD and were not made as exceptions. It's important that World of Warcraft plays like an MMO and not a button-mashing action RPG where you are required to input multiple button presses every second. That being said, there are still definitely tons of abilities that don't feel great when they're on the GCD. I group these into two general categories. First is power-up abilities, where you press them to empower your character. They feel bad when they're on the GCD. You want to maximize your damage or healing during these spells, and having to sit around and wait for the global cooldown after you press them can feel like an eternity, especially when you're using it during an important moment. This includes spells like Avenging Wrath for paladins or Spirit Shell for priests. They've done a little bit of fixing of these abilities in the past, for example, making Ascendance from Shaman put out a burst heal when pressed, or Rapture from Priest applying a power word shield onto your target. There are still a lot of abilities though that don't feel great to press. The second category of GCD offenders are reactionary buttons that are used primarily to keep yourself alive. You don't necessarily mind that there's a cooldown after you press them, however, if you press another button, then you are locked out of your defensive abilities for a short time, and against some mechanics, you can die almost immediately. This includes abilities like Demon Hunter's Netherwalk or Divine Shield from Paladins. While you could argue that these abilities should or shouldn't be on the global cooldown, there are certain tank abilities too, like Frenzied Regeneration from Guardian Druids, that are really big offenders to this. This is where the phrase getting global comes from, dying within the window of a global cooldown before you can even react to pressing something. To continue on the update, Blizzard is removing many burst cooldowns from the GCD. These abilities are from my first category of offenders, or power-up abilities. By burst cooldowns we mean spells like Avenging Wrath or Arcane Power, whose primary purpose is to increase your damage or healing output every 2 or 3 minutes. The proper use of these abilities should feel satisfying. There are some examples, many of the burst cooldowns fall short, all the stuff that I just mentioned. We've heard feedback that incurring a global cooldown to do nothing but enhance subsequent button presses is unsatisfying, and we agree. While our goal remains making it so that when abilities are on the global cooldown they feel compelling, in the meantime we want to avoid hindering smooth combat rotations. We are removing several abilities from the GCD, and in some cases rolling back changes we've made in an attempt to make the GCD feel worthwhile. The post goes on to list some of the major abilities. Some classes here definitely will be happy. The big pally cooldowns like Wings and HA are going to feel so much better. Avatar from Warriors, Pillar of Frost on DK. Dark Soul is removed because, yeah, Warlocks definitely need to be stronger right now. First off, let's get the obvious stuff out of the way. These are great changes. Almost all of the abilities on this list felt pretty terrible to press, and these changes will feel much better. I'm happy that Blizzard is listening and willing to go back on changes. I've been playing games my whole life, and it's very, very rare that a game developer implements a change like this, then is willing to go back on it and revert it later. Let's talk about some of the bad. First off, it's a shame that the best news in a while is simply an undo of a change they made 2 years back. I think part of the reason it's so hard to move forward into making WoW a better game is that there's so many negative changes like this that take so long to get fixed. I wish we could have reverted these changes a year and a half ago or never put them in at all, and then instead we could be talking about new, innovative ways to make rotations feel good. Secondly, they're just ignoring the other half of the problem, that there are a lot more spells that should also be removed from the GCD, like Frenzied Regen. I'm hoping I'm wrong here and that Blizzard slowly adds to the list over the course of the beta, but to me it looks like they've drawn a clear line mentioning burst cooldown spells in their post and they don't want to look at anything else. As a healer especially, having certain things on the global cooldown feels bad when you need to use them for emergencies. Let's say my raid is just about to down a boss, but our healers are out of mana, people are starting to die, but then my big Resto Druid cooldowns are coming back. First, I have to press Tree of Life, then Innervate, and I'm wasting precious seconds casting spells that do 0 healing as my party is dying. It's going to be especially noticeable after the stat squish, and many healers could be progression rating with single-digit haste. I haven't even learned half the classes in this game yet, so let me know what you guys think should be removed from the GCD as well. Actually, more importantly, let Blizzard know. I'll leave a link to the blue post in the description of this video so you can go give them your feedback. I really hope they're listening. I also wanted to cover a few profession changes and other topics that have been brought to attention in the last week. First is that the experience gem has been basically removed and replaced with a swim speed gem. There have been lots of questions about leveling in Shadowlands, and it looks like Blizzard is trying to do what they can to extend the leveling experience. Right now, I would estimate it takes about 10 to 12 hours to level from 50 to 60 in the game right now. And to me, that's fair, and I don't mind the removal of experience bonuses. There will be plenty of time to level up characters before the Raid, Mythic Plus, and PvP seasons start. Hopefully we see some of the leveling bonuses sneak back into the game in later patches to help returning players or alts catch up though. Next, it looks like scrolls won't be available in Shadowlands at all. If you want the intellect, AP, or stamina buff, you're going to need to bring that class to your party or raid. Early in the alpha, there were some scrolls data mined, but at this point they're still unfinished. With the game less than 2 months away and nearly every other consumable available on the beta, it looks like scrolls will not be returning. I think this is a fine change, along with the nerf from 10% to 5% of these buffs. In raids, it will ensure these classes still get their respective spots, and in dungeons, it's a nice bonus, but still optional. Last is that it's very likely that also the engineering battle res is going to get removed in Shadowlands as well. This primarily affects dungeon content, since there's no battle resing in PvP, and in raid you will always have them. However, for 5-man content, it's a really big deal. It's almost a necessity that you bring at least one combat res into a dungeon squad, and engineering res made it so you didn't have to worry about having a class that could do it. With the removal of battle res, you're going to have to bring either a Death Knight, a Druid, or a Warlock into your group. In terms of DPS and tanks, this is probably a good change, considering Death Knights and Warlocks and Guardian Druids haven't been the most popular pick during Battle for Azeroth for dungeons, and this will help them see some more play. For healers though, it's a bit frustrating, since the reigning champion of dungeon healers, the Resto Druid, is the only one with a combat res. Druids are already really solid dungeon healers, and now they're even more likely to be brought. I remember trying to look for dungeon groups as a Mistweaver. It was always frustrating. I would apply to a group that needed a healer, I would get declined, and then immediately the group would relist with Druid only in the title. I'm okay with group buffs like 5% stamina or attack power being specific to classes. However, battle reses feel like something that isn't optional in long dungeon content, especially with the frustrating checkpoint system in most dungeons. I think I'd like to see these brought back, although it's very unlikely at this point. With all of the removal of these critical profession items, I'd really like to see some more effort put forth on the in-game professions. I think professions are a really underdeveloped feature right now in WoW, and it would be cool if they could find some more creative ways to improve them. That covers all of the most recent batch of Shadowlands changes. It still looks like there's a pretty big balance update coming soon, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the big changes coming in World of Warcraft, as well as tons of guides and walkthroughs when the game is released. Happy keying!